celebrating Wellington County's first responders and emergency personnel. Dr. Henry Mcdonald was the village of Iran's first resident doctor in the 1870s. Mcdonald was born in Caledon, but it was in Iran Village that he started his medical practice, before joining the Confederate Army early in 1865. After the American Civil War ended, he spent time in France, but returned to Iran to resume his practice. Dr. Mcdonald died on January 3, 1896. Dr. Helen Elizabeth Ryan, the first woman to practice medicine in Northern Ontario, was originally from Wellington County. Born in 1860 to John and Margaret Reynolds of Mount Forest, Dr. Ryan graduated from Queen's University in 1885, part of the second class that allowed female students. She opened her first practice in Toronto, where she married Thomas John Ryan. The couple moved to Sudbury, where Helen practiced medicine for 17 years while also raising 5 children. In 1907, the family moved to British Columbia. Dr. Ryan was unable to practice medicine in the province, but she became active in public life and the suffragist movement. Helen passed away on July 9, 1947, at 87 years of age. A group of firefighters gathers for a photograph in their fire hall in the 1870s. These may have been members of the Elora Fire Department. They are gathered around a horse-drawn fire engine. During this period, all of the equipment used by firefighters was powered by hand. At 12 noon on May 1, 1901, the Kenilworth grist mill exploded, leveling buildings, but leaving the mill workers who were on their lunch break unharmed. Here we see a large group gathered to clear the wreckage after the catastrophe. Dr. Norman C. Wallace of Alma is seen here following his graduation from the University of Toronto in 1894. Dr. Wallace practiced in Alma until 1913. He served during World War I and was stationed in Seaford, England during the Spanish influenza outbreak of 1918 to 1920. He continued to tend to the sick and dying, despite contracting the illness himself. Following his recuperation overseas, he worked at the Ontario Reformatory in Guelph. He was brimful of courage, courtesy, and kindness, said Brigadier General Kenneth S. Torrance, a nephew of the doctor. These nurses were among the many Wellington County residents who entered service during World War I. Florence Cuthbert of Elora is seen in the studio portrait on the left, wearing her World War I military nursing uniform. In the photo on the right, 3 Red Cross nurses stand with their armbands turned toward the camera. Furthest right is Anne McDonald of Bellwood, Ontario. Nursing Sister Alice Cook was born in Mount Forest on December 29, 1893. She died just days after her 25th birthday from influenza and pneumonia contracted while serving on the staff of the Hospital for Invalid Soldiers in Toronto. She was the only woman from Wellington County to die as a result of war service in the Great War of 1914 to 1918. These pins were worn by Wellington County nurses Janet Card, Frances Ganley, also known as Ada Lines, and Jean Robb. Janet Card served as a Red Cross nurse at Bramshot Camp in England during World War I. Ada Lines of Kenilworth was a private duty nurse in Ontario and director of nursing at the Albert Memorial Hospital in Wyandotte, Michigan. Jean Robb worked for the Red Cross during World War II. Winifred Matheson of Coningsby, Erin Township, volunteered with the Red Cross and is seen here in Toronto in 1917. Nursing was a family affair for the Bryden sisters of Iramosa Township. On the left are Harriet and Helen Bryden. Both served overseas during World War I as nurses in England, France, and Northern Africa. On the right, their sister Janet, who traveled to China as a missionary nurse in the 1930s. In 1918, Charles Ogilvy Hemming, a Manitoba bank manager originally from Guelph Township, enlisted for military service. He was assigned to a squadron of Northwest Mounted Police officers and immediately deployed to Siberia, Russia. This portrait was taken in a Guelph photographer's studio around 1918. Hubert John Schorse painted this portrait of Dr. Marianne Templin to commemorate her graduation from the medical program at the University of Toronto in 1922. Marianne Isabel Templin was the daughter of John Charles Templin and Annie Black of Fergus. During the Second World War, Dr. Templin was named the first female medical officer in the Royal Canadian Navy. In 1946, she became the Assistant Medical Officer of Health for Windsor. This Canadian Red Cross Society truck was used in the county of Wellington during the 1920s. The Canadian branch of the Red Cross was officially created in 1909. Volunteers provided Canadian nurses and the general public with health information and education. This photo from the 1930s gives us a bird's-eye view of Harriston firefighters in action. Members of the Arthur Fire Department stand proudly with their fire truck around 1940. Public School Inspector L.P. Menzies stands next to a World War II-era Red Cross truck in Fergus. A display next to the truck reads, "Young Canada Carries On," and reports on amounts raised for the Ambulance Fund, Navy League, and War Savings. This ambulance was used in Fergus during the 1940s. It may seem strange to us now, but it used to be common for funeral directors like Lorne Pattison of Fergus to provide and even operate ambulances in their communities. The nurse pictured on the far right is Addie Hamill Painter, who was superintendent at Groves Memorial Community Hospital. Two Beatty Brothers employees participate in a first aid training exercise around 1950. This badge is mounted on a police hat that was worn in the 1940s by Jim Penfold, a Wellington County police officer in West Garifraxa Township and a World War I veteran. Norm Behrens, Jack Picken, Doug Wiltsey, and Chief Roy Smith were members of the Fergus Police Force in 1957. Police officers from across Wellington County gathered for a meeting in December 1959. Seen here from left to right are Constable Bill Williams, Chief Bill Jenks, also known as Jingles, Constable Joe Balzer, Garnett Hamilton, Sergeant John Pickens, Constable Charlie Leith, Chief Arthur Morton, Chief Ted Zimmer, Constable Steve Mew, Chief Roy Smith, Chief Forrest Inch, and Constable Doug Wiltsey. They served the areas of Arthur, Elora, Fergus, Harriston, and Palmerston. This coat was worn by a captain in the fire department in Fergus in the 1960s. The rubberized exterior of the coat was waterproof, but it would have offered limited protection from heat and flame. The Pyrene Manufacturing Company of Canada made this fire extinguisher, and it was distributed by Puslinch Mutual Fire Insurance Company in the 1950s. The Pyrene Company, founded in 1914 and now known as Chubb Fire Security Limited, was a global leader in the development of firefighting equipment. They opened their Canadian division in 1953. Cherry Bus Lines supplied their vehicles with Bauer and Black automobile first aid kits, like this one. Alva Cherry was born in Peel Township in 1921. He opened Alva Cherry's garage in Drayton in 1946, began driving a school bus in the late 1940s, and later founded Cherry Bus Lines Limited. This photograph, taken by Phil Cara in 1960, captures the staff of the Wellington County Health Unit, promoting their vital programs and services. An Ontario provincial police officer signals out the window of a restored 1941 highway patrol car, in this photo taken in Harriston around 1975. Car 1, as it was known, was used by the OPP in public displays and parades well into the 1990s. Law enforcement's new two-way radios were front-page news in the Harriston Review of January 18, 1967. Chief Constable Ted Zimmer of Harriston, left, and Constable Jim Gamble of Palmerston, right, were pictured using the new equipment. St. John Ambulance volunteers have operated mobile first aid posts at events across Canada since the 1960s. Here outside the Fergus Curling Club in 1981 are Bruce McNamara, Rotarian, Debbie Bath and John or Jack Campbell of the Fergus St. John Ambulance, and Wilf Trask. Pictured here in 1985 are two paramedics from the Palmerston and District Ambulance Service. These firefighters were the first on the scene of the J.P. Rundle feed mill fire on Norman Street in Palmerston, Saturday, June 9, 1984. Palmerston Police Chief Forrest A. Inch was a 30-year veteran of the Palmerston Force. In 1960, he was president of the Wellington County Police Association.